In January last year, COVID patients were banging on the doors of this Wuhan hospital, desperate to be treated. Medical staff were struggling to cope with the number of infected people and with how best to look after them at a time when little was known about the new virus. The documentary 76 Days shows what they and their patients endured as coronavirus took hold. Hao Wu, in your film you see the desperate struggle of patients in hospital deciding whether to eat or breathe, and you see the ID cards and phones of the dead. It really brings home the brutality of COVID. And I just wondered, when you first saw all the footage in full, what impact did it have on you?
I started researching this film in early February, and as part of the process, I reached out to over a dozen filmmakers who had started filming in Wuhan already, and that's how I found my two co-directors. So I remember among the first batch of rushes I received from them, included the scene of basically the opening scene of the current film, the nurse running down the hallway, wanting to so desperately to say goodbye to her dead father. I just remember I was crying, I was bawling in front of the computer because it had a huge emotional impact on me. Up until then, I had read extensively about the outbreak in Wuhan. I had seen cell phone footage, people shot on their phones and shared on social media. But really, my two co-directors' footage brought me there to the eye of the storm, so to speak, and to witness the panic, the fear, and the desperation so up close and personal.
With a previous documentary, you were actually detained by the Chinese government. How concerned were you doing this film that you might get stopped by the government?
We completely, during the production and post-production process, we were completely secretive. And before Toronto International Film Festival announced its program that included our film. Before that, only 5 people in the world knew that we were working on this. Just because COVID-19 has become such a sensitive geopolitical topic, and we don't want to attract any unnecessary attention before we finish this film. I think, like everybody who works in Chinese media knows there are certain lines that you cannot cross before you attract government's attentions. But obviously, everybody defined it differently.
The film doesn't stray into politics. Was that a conscious decision? Because obviously there are many questions about whether China downplayed the extent of the crisis in Wuhan.
My earliest instinct was definitely investigative. I started researching this project, really wanted to, like everybody else, right? What happened? Who's patient zero? What went wrong to make this outbreak so bad? Everybody had those questions. The entire China had that question. Fairly quickly, I realized it's going to be really hard for me as a documentary filmmaker to discover anything that hasn't been well covered in the media already. And also the way Chinese politics operates is so opaque, it's really hard to draw any concrete evidence-based conclusion of what truly happened. And secondly, the footage from my two co-directors that's so unique, so powerful about the human stories. And then the longer we live through this pandemic, the more I realize we've been hearing too much about the statistics, about the political talking points. But sometimes we forget that there are real human beings whose life being affected by this, and we forget their stories.
And just finally, Wuhan will forever be linked in the public imagination around the world with the start of this awful pandemic. What future do you think, having done this film based in Wuhan, what future for Wuhan?
Wuhan will forever bear the stigma of the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think artists like myself and my co-directors, our job is to return the humanity to the city, to let people know Wuhan is not only a name, a stigma, but it also includes a lot of people who are just like us, who just try to survive like us, who are capable of being kind to each other just like us.
Hao Wu, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kathy.